Welcome to the Black Print. This is Tiffany Milkhannie, and I'm going to go ahead and finish off where we left off with our book, Indian Alchemy, or Rasayana in the Light of Asceticism and Geriatrics by Madhasan S. Okay, we left off on chapter 14, and not chapter 14. Remember, this book is numbered by paragraph. So paragraph 14. Chakra and his two categories of medicines. Sir P.C. Ray assigned Charaka, a much earlier date than does the French savant Sylvain Levy. The latter makes him the court physician and the Indo-Scythian king Kanishka, who reigned in the 2nd century A.D. Professor Sufi, writings in 1949, seems to agree with Levy. I am interested in a practicing physician who is also the first to codify medicine in India. As such, Levy's theory appeals at least as an expediency measure not likely to be improved upon. P.C. Ray quotes Charaka defining Rasayana as follows. Medicines are of two kinds. The one promotes the strength and vitality, and the other cures diseases. Whatever promotes longevity, health, and virility is called Rasayana. We note that priority is assigned to Rasayana, which represents drugs of rejuvenation. Strange enough, medicines proper curing diseases come next in rank. Nothing corresponding can be found in any other system of medicine, certainly not the Codex of Hippocrates. This preference for Rasayana is traceable to the ascetic who went out searching for medicinal plants not to cure ailments but to rejuvenate himself. And it is the same ascetic who recited the two kinds of hymns according to Atharva Veda. One prayer is called the Bhayashayani for curing diseases, and the other the Arushyana, interpreted properly as desiring rejuvenation come longevity. The two prayers in Atharva Veda then corresponds to the two divisions of medicine, Ayurveda proper and Rasayana. Thus, who recited Bhayashayani hymns gave his thoughts a material form and established Ayurveda or medicine proper, and the reciter of Ayushyana hymns correspondingly founded Rasayana, or the art of geriatrics cum rejuvenation, which the founder needed personally. By now, Charaka's Codex has been translated and annotated in 6 large volumes. In Volume 5, a chapter begins, recognizing only 2 kinds of medicines, one of promotive of vigor in the healthy, the other destructive of disease in the ailing. The former division is called Rasayana. It is not to be mistaken with aphrodisiacs, for which the term used Vijikarana. Aphrodisiacs can be legitimately required even by the debilitated young and are actually used mostly by such young people who wish to fully enjoy sexual life. Rasayana, on the contrary, were specific remedies for rejuvenation and as such meant for aged, if they otherwise were free from any disease. The drugs were so powerful that they could also treat incurable diseases. The active principle was soul and entity, which is all growing and all changing. By its use, no tissue, gland, or organ can remain indolent, and all were forced to function normally. This would see that the age loses his wrinkles and even the seriously ill his paleness. Sharaka, as the compiler of what he found well recognized, could not but assign priority to such wonderful preparations. Moreover, he seems to have been convinced, for he offers his own recipes. Paragraph 15, Herbal Rasayana. The foremost among the Rasayanas in Sarakas comes Kavana Prasa Linctus. It was conceived and tried upon himself by the sage Saivanian. It is celebrated as the highest Rasayana. By is Savayana, through grown very old, become young once again. By recourse to its vitalization, the great sages such as Savana and others regained their youth, became most attractive to women, and acquired the capacity to bear all hardships, an indispensable asset for the lonely ascetic. Sharaka gives a long recipe of Savana's preparation with all ingredients as herbal. The major item is amala, Philanthus umbilica. Next, the Marobalin, Terminalia shrubula or har. Now, amla is the richest natural source of ascorbic acid, or vitamin C. This can reduce yellow gold chloride to red colloidal gold, even in a cold solution. The odor myrobalan is rich in tannins, which can reduce gold chloride in a boiling solution. Thus, both the above drugs are strong reducing substances. Lastly, ghee, or boiled butter, is used as a preserving vehicle along with honey, which again has reducing properties. The three drugs, Philanthus umbilica, amla, and Terminalia shrubula, har, and T. balearica bahara, are called triphala, three fruits, and is translated to English as three myrobalans. It is arabicized as a trifle. Sharaka gives a preparation which the three myrobalans as main constituent, but this is further saturated with ghee or boiled butter, which must be looked upon as the fourth component of the preparation. This emphasis on ghee is the best confirmed in the light of another preparation designed as embellic myroban ghee, and it is claimed that the user remains young for hundreds of years and acquire unimpaired sex vigor and becomes the parent of many children. Here I cannot help recalling the latest work on longevity by Professor D. Harman of Nebraska. He found antioxidants increases the lifespan of mice by 44%, and when the results on animals are converted to human terms, the lifespan of man would increase from 70 to 100 years. Harman found oil-soluble antioxidants to be effective. He also tried ascorbic acid, but with indifferent results. Sharaka, however, emphasizes the use of both water-soluble ascorbic acid and ghee, which would contain its own oil-soluble antioxidant. He thus unwittingly realized which importance for, on page 503, he mentions the virilific ghee, where boiled butter is the main constituent of the Rasayana. Remembering that one essential feature is logically deduced from another, if amla and soma are both drugs of longevity, we expect the common extra medicinal uses. soma plant was used to furnish a drink of immortality. It was used as the agency of resurrection to be entered with the dead. With virtues bestowed upon Amala as rejuvenating the aged, we expected to find its secondary use as a drug of immortality. As this follows logically from the assumption that Amala carried a rich quantum of soul next only to Soma or Phaedra, Dishart carried out excavations of Ahichartra. Sorry, I'm probably jacked that word up, but I tried. A famous site in India. There he found Amala-shaped bins of science and traces of high green glaze. And Amala is a yellowish green fruit. These beads are dated prior to 350 AD. Then he further mentions Amalaka-shaped terracotta, dark brown color, well-fired beads of about 200 AD. And Amala on drying becomes dark brown. These beads would be the same age in which Sharaka is supposed to have lived. Lal also found at Hastinapura, Meru, dist beads which he illustrates as resembling the natural amla fruit even better. His findings are dated 100 BC to 200 AD. The beads were worn as charms, which would be expected to offer longevity, if nothing more. Archaeologists further mention that Amala was also served as the model for architectural domes. I find its 6 concave-sided seed has been projected to shape such a dome in one of the temples in Ellora Caves near Aurangabad, India. The Amla was venerated to the extent of donating its shape to the temple architecture is expected from it's expected from having been recognized as conferring immortality. Only Amla has not been deified since its discovery came apparently later than Vedic times. Paragraph 16. Metallic preparations as Rasayana. I have devoted much time conceiving the oxidation-reduction system of the aged as compared with that of a youth. This is most vital for understanding geriatrics. Here I can recall a simple phenomenon explained by a friend. He writes that in 1740, cast iron guns from a Spanish ship sunk off the coast of Mull had lain in the sea for 152 years. On scraping away the corroded surface, they became hot to touch. Iron had undergone reduction to ferrous oxide, which, on coming into contact with the oxygen on the air, rapidly oxidized to ferric oxide with the evolution of heat. The reaction being strongly exothermic. The phenomenon, though belonging to an inorganic world, can serve as the model to elucidate the difference between the biological system of the old and the young. The item of primary importance is a reductible substance. It is this which, on contact with air, delivers energy as heat. But heat is only one form of energy. The same reduced substance can offer other forms which cannot be discussed here. We accept the proverbial recognition of the aged as having a cold body, whereas the young a warm one. But what the system of the aged lacks are reducing substances. Ascorbic acid would be one, oil-soluble antioxidant would be another. Thus, the genesis of warmth characterizing the robust health of youth is traced to the presence of reducing substances. Here, reduced iron would be a third, by no means less important than the other two. Iron is the decisive constituent of blood, responsible for its role of respiration and body temperature. We therefore assume that iron is not recurrently reduced in the body of an old man from want of reducing substances. Then what is utilized is excreted, and we otherwise know that the old people look anemic from want of enough iron and thus of enough hemoglobin in the system. But it is also obvious that if depleted stock of iron is to be replaced, reducing substances have also to be supplemented. Iron which cannot be reduced is no iron and would be excreted. And we also find specialists in geriatrics wisely recommending both iron and ascorbic acid. Here, Siraka rightly assigns first place to amla, which is rich in vitamin C. That he has not overlooked iron now has drawn our attention. Siraka has an iron vitalizer. Its method of preparation would now be called as that of calcined metals. This term serves as a designation of metallic preparations called kishtas, literally killed metals in Persian, and bashmas, meaning killed by being burnt in Sanskrit. And their methods of preparation are typically of alchemy. Chakra recommends iron to be beaten into thin plates, then heated red hot in fire, dipped in reducing agents, above all in extract of amla, then pulverized and finally preserved in amla extract and honey with its own reducing sugars. It is left as an earthen vessel for over a year, which would thoroughly reduce iron to a ferrous compound. The preparation is to be taken with honey and ghee every morning. If continued for a year, one will acquire the vitality of an elephant and become immune to disease, old age, and to death. Such would be calcined iron or iron Rasayana, herbal ferrous or herbal metallic in its makeup. Storing for a year would guarantee iron as completely reduced. Here we can look for two interpretations, one of a natural phenomenon similar to the one which Friend offers and the other which the alchemist would. Paragraph 17. Siraka extolling iron and a reducing agent. Another vitalizer is called the Brahmin vitalizer, containing emblic myroblastmas and iron. The declaration of its contents pinpoint two ingredients, ascorbic acid and iron. It emphasizes the importance of the two drugs in geriatrics, which can be fully endorsed by modern medicine. Siraka extols it, saying that it is capable of keeping a man alive for thousands of years, being invented by Brahma, the creator himself. It is not yet obvious to which of the two Siraka would impart priority. However, no vitalizer is purely metallic, nor is iron calcined by itself. On the contrary, he has a simple emblic myrobalin vitalizer, and explaining it, he writes that as many fruits of amla as he eats, so many millenniums does he live with youth restored. Eating to his fill of such fruits, he became like unto the gods. He would have otherwise called amla the divine fruit, since the recommendation comes from Brahma, the creator. We have here to realize the style in which the ancient thinkers used to express themselves. If a red Indian found coca to be divine plant, Chakra found amla to have been prescribed by Brahma, the creator, making its user godlike, by which it meant young and immortal. All gods in Greek and Hindu religions are models of young people. This makes a deity or a god a synonym of eternal youth. Paragraph 18. Siraka's incidental mention of a gold preparation. Siraka's paragraph on iron vitalizer ends by stating that, in the same manner, the use of other metals such as gold and silver is promotive of longevity and a panacea. We can definitely conceive the gold preparation as herbal ormus or herbal metallic, for calcination is always accompanied by a herbal principle, and further pulverization is facilitated by the use of herbal extracts fresh or decoction. Had alchemy existed in the Sharaka's time, he would have at least given priority to gold over iron. On the contrary, to him, as the physician, gold rightly comes far behind iron. He gives the reader the impression that he tries to make the codex exhaustive, leaving no trace element without some mention. In an earlier communication, I have explained how such a herbal ormus preparation can be made by a most primitive method. Gold is granulated and rubbed in a granite mortar and pestle, and herbal extracts, preferably of amla and myrobalans, which Sharaka recommends. When the process is continued, be it for a few months, yellow gold becomes a brick red powder. When further pulverization does not increase the shade of redness, the preparation is pronounced to be perfect. Here we can legitimately confirm to the effect that which transformed yellow gold into a red metallic powder was a herb, or better still, its juice. We know otherwise that the reducing substances of a plant can turn yellow gold into its red colloidal form. The juice then can be reasonably designated as the red gold making juice, or simply gold making juice. The importance of the term will be realized later on. It is to be noted that even though no calcination was employed, gold was pulverized with herbal principles. The explanation is that pulverization as rubbing promotes colloidal formation. This is greatly accelerated by adding reducing agents coming from plants. To the alchemist, however, pulverization was killing the metal with physical force, and using an herbal principle was resurrecting it by infusing an herbal soul. It produced a resurrection body. Paragraph 19. Shilajit, or mineral pitch vitalizer. In Sharaka, as vitalizers, first come pure herbal preparation, and next herbal metallic, usually called calcined metals. Thirdly, there is a mineral pitch vitalizer, and we shall see that by its makeup it is herbal mineral. This pitch is called today Shilajit. Sharaka informs that it is exuded by mountain rocks loaded with gold and other metallic ores, all variety of which have the smell of cow's urine. A genuine sample of Shilajit was brought for me by the archaeologist friend from Pt.3 up north in Pakistan. It looked like a rock consisting of sand and pebbles, cemented with some pitch, which, however, was not obvious. This became at once evidence when the rock was easily dissolved in water, reducing a solution dark brown in color, resembling humans. I gave a piece of the dry rock to my son, Ephraim, to smell when he was not yet 10. As a child, he was fond of the animals, and he knew the cow and goat well. Yet he took no time to declare that the rock smells of horse. Shilajit contains hippuric acid, and the word was so coined because the horse urine contains it. In fact, urine of all herbivorous animals contains hippuric acid, as such also the cow. Cow's urine was used in several rituals, both by ancient Iranians and Hindus, which explains Sharaka's familiarity with it and his comparison of the smell of Shilajit with cow's urine. The origin of Shilajit has not been investigated. Such as coal represents plants buried in mines, decomposed vegetation buried as rock is Shilajit. Such would be provisional account of its origin. Sharaka extols it as being loaded with minerals like gold. I submitted a portion of the Shilajit I had to an American chemist who kindly reported the presence of several trace elements, silver being one, but no gold. Thus, there is some evidence to support Sharaka's claim. We know that the trace elements are constituents of different enzymes, and Shilajit, as supplying them, would be of great therapeutic value. trying to close the paragraph, we note that even shilajit is herbal in origin and therefore is herbal mineral. Though a mineral product, the importance of a herbal principle has remained constant, and only in the light can we appreciate how shilajit has also been extolled as a panacea. But whereas herbal Rasayanas and herbal mineral Rasayanas are natural products, herbal metallics Rasayanas were not found in nature, and alchemy made is concerned to make them. Thus started alchemy as pharmaceutical chemistry, retaining the objective of rejuvenation. It must not be overlooked that in Sharaka no mercurial is mentioned, whereas cinnabar was the drug of choice among the Chinese, and its synthetic preparation, as vermilion, gave rise to alchemy, which at the beginning was only concerned with rejuvenation. Paragraph 20. Calcite metals as phlogiston. We have discussed why Sharaka recommends storing his iron preparation for a year to mature it. It implies reduction identical with the friend described as submerged iron guns producing ferrous oxide. Davis, discussing theoretical alchemy, observes that Stahl's discovery was that combustibility is transferable. We would now say the material which results from a reduction is itself capable of acting as a reducing agent. He gave the name of phlogiston. Then reduced iron was prepared so as to serve as a reducing agent, which can be designated phlogiston. And iron vitalizers of Sharaka would be such phlogistons, a very important conclusion. Moreover, all antioxidants will become valuable as geriatric drugs. Paragraph 21. Calcite metals as alchemical preparations. The explanation equating Rasayana phlogiston is quasi-alchemical. We proceeded further to appreciate what a genuine alchemist would have to say. Here we begin by referring to an excellent article by Samson. He writes that Paracelsus accepted the doctrine of the alchemist that a bird, after being burnt, could be restored to life by the putrefaction, incubation, in a sealed vessel. We shall first handle putrefaction and then the rebirth of the bird which was burnt to death. In Sharaka, the iron amla preparation was kept in an earthen pot for 1 whole year. Hermetically sealing was unknown to him, which was first conceived by the Chinese, as I have explained elsewhere. That Sharaka emphasizes long storage for maturation can be early accepted as the incubation of his preparation. Friend's observation on iron guns under sea also comes under the category of incubation prior to iron being reduced to ferrous oxide. We now wish to interpret this reduction of iron as an alchemist would. Our term incubation is a synonym of the alchemist's putrefaction. Incubation refers to time or to temperature or to both, and to nothing more. Putrefaction, however, signifies post-mortem dissolution of corporeal elements. A rotten egg, for example, will show its contents having undergone putrefaction. Thus, putrefaction follows death. Here comes the special interpretation of the phenomenon by the alchemist. An egg which is rotten has suffered death, but an egg revealed incubation has undergone so to pseudo-death. It is the end of one stage and the beginning of another. A chicken can be conceived as having 3 periods in its life cycle. One of latency of growth, as in the fresh egg, then of proper growth as embryo still in the egg, initiating dissolution of previous contents and reshuffling the morphological elements thus produced to finally reconstruct a living form. Let us consider an old house being replaced by new architecture. The building will be demolished into broken walls which cannot be utilized for reconstruction. The walls will be further reduced by debris of stones and bricks which can then be duly exploited. Putrefaction or incubation brings the contents of the egg to a stage comparable not to broken walls, but to stones and bricks. If these be further dissolved, only then, in one case, the egg will become rotten, and in the other, sand and dust as perfect ruins. Thus, putrefaction depicts an early stage than the last, as the development of inert life into dynamic life, of a shapeless mass into elements capable of reconstruction. A seed during germination shows corresponding putrefaction or dissolution of previous parts into a plastic mass which enables reshaping, which growth generated thereby into an impressive living whole. The fact not to be overlooked is that putrefaction is internal or submerged growth. This remains undetected in the beginning when no growth is obvious, but it serves as a marker of plastic mass which ultimately shapes a chicken. Thus, when the end result is living chicken and its previous state can be described as putrefaction of the egg, this can only be growth undetected, as many a phenomenon in nature is. Putrefaction, judged by what actually follows, is growth. Putrefaction can be best compared with fermentation, where again growth is energetic yet unobservable. Briefly, putrefaction is growing, starting with dissolution of previous elements and resynthesis of microelements into macrofractions, then into tissues and organs, which develops as a whole into a chicken. It is destruction leading to a new reconstruction. It is a kind of reshuffling. To the alchemist and animist, as animists, even a metal had life, but ordinary iron was dead metal, while reduced iron oxide, generating heat on contacting air, would be a living mineral. He thus took inert raw materials and tried to infuse life into them, and once they became living entities, they would transfer their life essence onto man and belong to his life. Inert materials carried life as does an egg. They were potentially living, and alchemy, as art, tried to convert what is potential into a dynamic form. Moreover, it is not to be any soul or a rich quantum of it. It is to be an ever-increasing soul, qualitatively superior to those of any simple or individual drug, be it soma plant or metal gold. And this requires activating the unstable soul and replacing it by ever-growing one, which alone is everlasting. In effect, it means killing and resurrecting. Here, the vehicle or in the body is to be retained, and the life-prolonging element alone is to be substituted. Thus, there is no immortality without resurrection or rebirth, as in the legend of the Phoenix. Paragraph 22. The legend of the Phoenix as implying resurrection. This legend easily explains the theory of resurrection and also of alchemy, which tries to initiate resurrection. The bird flapped its wing against the dried twigs of its nest. The friction generated heat and produced fire. The bird was burnt but was reborn. The legend transferred to alchemy gives a correct picture of calcined metals or metallic Rasayanas. To begin with, if the bird was burnt to death, a Rasayana is actually called today Bhashma, or burnt one, and in Persian, Kushta, the killed one. And killing or death is necessary prelude to resurrection. The dead one becomes the first stage for the next to be the resurrected one. Phoenix was an ordinary mortal bird, but after being burnt, the vegetable principle Latin in the twigs of its nest revived it. now making it immortal. The right emphasis is on its immortality. Now there is a Chinese legend, same as the story of the phoenix. A prince of Hunan took an elixir of life, which his dog and a cock also picked up as residues, and ultimately all died. But subsequently the three revived and became drug-made immortals. Their mortal soul was replaced by an immortal soul, generated by the drug. Phoenix was the designation of a resurrected bird, which is the synonym of an immortal bird. The prince of the Hunan, who had a parallel career, became Hassan Sin, a designation for a drug made immortal. He was first killed, his elements of mortality sponged out and reconditioned to enable him to remain young forever. The change took place in the material nature of the flesh. It became soul-like in the body, now resurrection body, which Shep was beautifully described as the original body of Jesus, revealing supermaterial or sublime properties. With such a body, Jesus could reveal superhuman virtues. After his resurrection, Jesus could be seen all over as though space did not exist. Finally, he ascended to heaven, and so did the phase of Hunan in a broad daylight. As we are referring to Jesus, we realize his 3 days in the grave as what putrefaction would be in the eyes of the alchemist, or incubation, when the mortal remains are being reconditioned to become immortal. Matter of flesh was not decomposed, but gained spiritual properties. Resurrection body was not a gaseous body, but the original body of Jesus, highly spiritualized. When iron became magnetized, it remains iron, but becomes a super metal, and correspondingly, the material body of resurrection body becomes soul-like. There was no sense in changing the body, and thereby the individual. The entire idea started with preserving the body itself and only losing its infirmities. To change the body is to become another individual. It would be reincarnation, the body being new, the soul remaining as before. On the contrary, resurrection retains the body and allows the soul to retrieve it. Then alchemy initiates resurrection, which in some cases becomes identical with reincarnation, but this is incidental. Applying the ideal of resurrection to the preparation of medicaments, calcined metals became products of burnt and resurrected metals, or herbal metallic, where the metal was killed by heat, and the soul coming from a herb resurrected it to made it everlasting. The history of such preparation follows 3 stages of resurrection: death, incubation, and rebirth. In this paragraph, incubation has been explained as submerged growth or petrification. So, paragraph 23, growth versus reproduction. We have said earlier that growth is life. It is an axiom implying definition of life. Then to grow is to be alive. Since crystals or minerals grow, animism considers minerals to be living entities. Even well-shaped metals, as distinct from rust, are endowed with soul and life. This can be confirmed by the belief that metals are supposed to grow. Friend writes that the Tibetan gold miners collect and export gold dust and refuse to launch the nuggets, as they are believed to be bred the dust. In fact, the nuggets are the geese that lay the golden eggs. Here, increments may result from expansion and vegetative growth of crystals, which can crumble into dust, be it of gold. Or the crystals can breed or reproduce, which can hardly apply to the case above. Friend has mistaken increment by growth for an increment by reproduction. Usually no such subtle difference is made, and this only makes our case difficult to explain. The Tibetans are animists, and animism is the generalization and abstraction of the phenomenon of growth. It is dualism that is correspondingly based on reproduction. We are particularly interested in the origin of that growth, which starts with incubation. Obviously, before incubation, there was perfect latency, and what appeared later as petrification, like fermentation, was growth of some kind. We have here a dynamite, as it were, which needs a little external heat to explode as growth. Incubation, thus, is a condition, whereas petrification is the result to growth. As a typical case of condition distinct from a genuine case, we can consider the following one. Frogs do not die of typhoid, but when a frog is inoculated and incubated, the germ is provided with the temperature necessary for its multiplication, and such a frog succumbs to the disease. It is otherwise immune because it is a cold-blooded creature, and the typhoid germ does not multiply at low temperatures. Thus, the condition of life being provided converts latency of life into its dynamic form, nothing really being added to it. The axiom further maintains that wherever there is a form of life, it is alive and there is potential growth. A plant, a crystal, and a metal, and all have specific forms, and all are endowed with life essence. Their quanta, however, differing considerably. Having arrived at this stage of clarity, we can appreciate Samson informing that archeans, a personification of life force in all created things possessing specific forms, was invented by Paracelsus and discussed by Van Helmont to elucidate and putative volitional power of matter to grow, to resist disease, to heal, and to reproduce itself. And Archias was nothing else than seminal power of every seed. Previous thinkers have mixed the doctrines of animism and dualism, or rather traced total increment to growth and reproduction without assigning due share to each. When a flock increases its due to reproduction, whereas when a creeper spreads out like a carpet, it is due to growth. But when a plant grows, the cells of its tissues multiply. Nevertheless, we do not recognize that an ovum or an egg can grow from a negligible size to an appreciable large one, and there the growth stops. Once it is fertilized and the later incubated cells multiply, and these shape themselves into a living form. Thus, further life starts with the union of opposites, and incubation is a condition incidental to the cause. A self-growing entity becomes reproductive when it is made up of two opposites. It is like magnetism arising with a magnet or a piece of iron with two poles, without which there is no magnetism. Our position would not be clear unless we admit first conditions of life. Temperature in the case of typhoid bacteria changing their potentiality of growth into actual dynamic growth, which really means life. Then the nature of soul or life essence is inherent in its vehicle. It must be dual nature to be able to grow and multiply, like two digits which may be added or may be multiplied according to circumstances. Animism with a mono-elemental soul could not explain any origin, because such a soul could only go on repeating or adding what there was to begin with. With two subsouls, the resultant can become multiplicative, which further surpasses the starting material. We then mistake the product as though something marvelous has resulted. What becomes multiplicative or reproductive we call creative because it becomes impressive. But just as growth in essence is in addition, reproduction in essence is multiplication. Such a separation of dual forces supporting life can be expressed in old terminology as due to two subsouls as distinct from a soul which is mono-elemental. In an earlier Article 1, I have called the two fractions of soul growth soul and soul reproductive, thus linking biology and mysticism. Growth soul is a connotative name for growth-inducing power, which even to biology is a mystery. Likewise, we do not know what sets a fertilized cell to start self-division. Thus can be conveniently designated self-reproductive, the actual origin of the phenomenon of reproduction or multiplication, subsequent to maximum growth, remaining again a mystery in biology. Moreover, identifying growth soul with Brahman of Indian mysticism and soul reproductive with Atman is again the main problem of Indian philosophy. We would be excused when, in fact, facing the same problem in theoretical alchemy. We cannot make the reader wiser than before. But what has been done here is a study of comparative general philosophy, including theoretical alchemy and Indian philosophy, as schools of dualism and monism. Finally, we must admit that life, growth, reproduction, and if soul equals life essence, then soul equals growth soul plus soul reproductive. This enables us to understand at once how Persilius speaks of Archaeus as seminal power of every seed. His seminal power is the subsoul, called here soul reproductive. A seed grows but has the potentiality to reveal reproductivity when required. Both, perhaps, growth and reproduction operate together at every stage. Only reproduction becomes obvious after the plant is full grown. Reproduction seems to be transcendent growth. Paragraph 24. Growth intersync to matter. If we face reproduction first, it can be traced back to growth. What then is its origin? It practically means what is the origin of matter itself. We start with some primordial energy. A quantum of energy freezes and becomes matter as a shell with a trace of energy remaining at its core. No matter is free from energy. The creation or matter carries this creator or energy. The Upanishads have described this phenomenon, stating that the creator created the universe and then entered into it. The two explanations are identical. Then, matter is also the carrier of energy, and the latter, as the progenitor, is the paracellus cause, life force in all created things. Energy tends to expand but enclose, and matter forces the latter to grow as much as it can. This explains the power of matter to grow, to which Paracelsus refers. If the quantum of energy is limited, or relatively the enveloping matter excessive, growth becomes slow. On the contrary, if there is much energy within a mere shell of matter covering it, growth will explode and the shell with further reconstructions and rebirths of matter can occur. But also imagine two units of matter, each with power to grow. Their unions would result in reproduction. Dualism, however, suggests that it is not merely two kinds of matter, but exact opposites. I further identify the opposites as mirror images, which can easily be taken to a common source like Adam and Eve to the same cloud of earth. Here, as the Upanishad's account is even better, it takes creation to a two-seated fruit. Whenever matter, it is inherent energy expands, it results in the breakup of the entity. When the two such units of matter, further qualified as opposites, unite, they do not grow, we destroy each other, but mutual growth results in division, which is reproduction. A fertilized egg is bi-elemental, incorporating two centers of potential growth. Incubation is a mere condition promoting growth in the case of dual-natured egg. The resultant growth of opposites with interactions upon each other results in shaping a self-supporting, independent life form, be it as a chicken. Okay, so for that last part, I just want to point out that we could take something from this as far as what's going on today in society with all of the destruction between man and woman, and the seeming like they're just at complete opposites and they're just having a feud right now. Basically, they're saying when two opposites come together in harmony, then it does not destroy each other, that they actually reproduce, and that's when reproduction comes into play. But right now, there's an imbalance in nature. We have one force trying to dominate the other, suppress and seclude the other, and so that's why we have all of the destructive forces between man and woman, and the misunderstandings and the relations that we're seeing taking place in society right now. I just wanted to note that the importance, just as we are able to see in nature, we're able to see in our alchemical processes how opposites coming together in a balanced nature causes reproduction. So it actually promotes the growth of the entity, not the destruction. The opposite, when there is an imbalance, then there becomes destruction. Okay, let's move forward. Paragraph 25. Animism versus dualism. To fully appreciate alchemy, we must understand both animism and dualism, which in turn are traceable to man's conceptions of growth and reproduction respectively. Its importance is once realized when we take petrification of the alchemist as due to the life force of all created things, and further down to the power of matter to grow. Since we have just explained growth and reproduction, we can turn to animism and dualism. The ideal of soul starts with animism. Man by nature is indifferent to such an abstruse problem, but the conception was forced upon man even when he was a hunter. He killed game, but also wild beasts and his enemies. A wounded wolf, for example, was still a danger, and to distinguish the living and the dead, he had to conceive the nature of life essence. Since most deaths, which he observed occurred from loss of blood, the formula of life became life equals body, blood, and blood equals soul as monoelemental. And we still believe life equals body equals soul. When the primitive thinker came to inquire into the nature of the mineral or what it consists of, he explained in his terms of human constitution. Even a mineral was made up of a body and soul. This doctrine is called animism. A stone also dies and becomes dust, but animism could not explain origin of things, and not even human birth properly. There still exist tribes in Australia and Melanesia on which Malinowski writes, according to the tribal lore, the child's body is built exclusively by the mother and the father contributing nothing. There is in every man or woman a spirit. After death, it appears in a woman's body, causing pregnancy. Thus, transmigration of the soul, a doctrine of animism, was applied to explain human birth. It is obvious that reproduction was overlooked and thus would have required the union of two elements. Later on, when man had taken to pastoral life and saw his animals reproducing, he realized that a male and a female as partners jointly contribute to the reproduction of an issue. In animism, even the universe had a soul, and it was called cosmic soul. Generalizing the abstracting from the phenomena of reproduction, dualism attributed even to the cosmic soul a dual nature. Its male subsoul was called yang in Chinese, meaning light, and the female subsoul yin, or darkness. Man's male subsoul is called spirit, and the female counterpart the soul, or soul specific. Before, animism had projected the human constitution to everything else. Now dualism assumed that, like the body of man, everything was dual nature, being contributions of its own male and female progenitors. Soul was no exception. Paragraph 26. The two subsouls. Soul was constituted to of two subsouls. We are to explain their relative attributes. The male soul, or yang soul, is spirit in English. It is responsible for lifespan. The more of it, the longer the life. Its synonyms would be growth soul. It is rich among plants, and growth is nowhere so conspicuous as in vegetable kingdom. The female soul, or yin soul, is merely soul in English. Here called the soul or soul specific, it confers form and individuality properties pertaining to matter or body as the vehicle of spirit, the life essence. Metal, being hard, heavy, and above all heat resistant, are strong-bodied and must harbor a rich portion of it. As such, the subsoul can be further called subcorporeal. Now, a herb is a delicate, non-resistant to heat. Its soul corporeal must be poor. On the contrary, a metal which hardly reveals any growth contains growth soul as a trace. Then a metal least capable of growing but most resistant to heat comes as the opposite of a plant, and which grows profusely but is easily scorched. They become ideal opposites with their four subsouls, as plant equals powerful, growth soul minus weak soul, corporal. Metal equals powerful soul, corporal plus weak growth soul. If we calcine them together, a certain temperature will kill the metal and expelling its weak growth soul, but leaving the body as a perfect, undecomposed corpse with this powerful soul corporal within. At the same heat, the plant would be left as ashes, and its powerful growth soul would be hovering to transmigrate into any vehicle. There would be the despirited metal ready to accept any soul. Thus, calcining means inducing a transmigration of herbal soul into a metallic body, but also resurrection of a metal killed by heat but revived by soul of the plant. Now, spirit or growth soul is common to all vehicles. Paracelsus calls it the life force and all created things. Thus, when the metal is resurrected by the soul of a plant, now spirit or growth soul is common to all vehicles. Paracelsus calls it the life force in all created things. Thus, when the metal resurrected by a soul, herbal soul, this is not specific. Consequently, the calcined metal can be looked upon as the result of reincarnation, as also of resurrection. The later should be resuscitation when its own spirit returns, but the dualism, all spirits are growth souls and nothing else. The spirit of a plant and of a metal are qualitatively the same. However, according to animism, is a calcined metal would represent a clear case of reincarnation. The monoelemental soul of a plant now transmigrates into a metal which has been forced to part with its own soul. The resultant becomes a metal carrying a herbal soul. Here the calcined metal, herbal metallic in a makeup, is more of an herb due to its soul, even though it is heavy and powdery like the rust of a metal than like the ashes of a plant. Rust is no metal to the alchemist. Rust is dead, metal is living. But herbal metallic preparations has a soul which denotes growth like a plant and makes the body strong like a metal. When the acceptor receives such a substance, his body regains robust health and his life essence grows like a plant which is perennial, conferring immortality. However, the explanation in the light of dualism makes calcined metal resurrection body rather than reincarnation body. Nevertheless, the real interpretation of calcined metals as Rasayana's being herbal metallic has to be confirmed. The Maharaja of Gando was a regular graduate of medicine, qualified from the Edinburgh University. He therefore can be considered as an authority to explain that the ancient Hindus have described the method of transferring the properties of vegetable cures to certain metals which intensify their efficacy and retain it a long time. Common sense refuses to accept the transference of herbal properties to a metal. The above statement is an impossible attempt to interpret in terms of rationalism a case clear enough in animism of an herbal soul reincarnating in a metal, thereby occupying a vehicle better than the one before. Briefly, calcined metal is reincarnation body according to animism, but resurrection body according to dualism. A resurrection body is a union between two entities clearly as such. The resurrection body as one, body and soul inseparable from each other, become soul incorporate. As quoted by J. Reed, J.E. Mercer explains that the alchemist would take a metal, say lead, and calcine it in the air, in which it changed into a powdery kind of cinder, red oxide of lead. Assuming, as they did, that a metal had a life soul of its own, what was more natural than to say it had died? It was the condition which they imagined a seed would be that had dried on the ground. Then they reheated the cinder in the crucible along with some grains of wheat. They watched the metal taking on again its original state, which was more natural than to suppose that the life soul in the grain of the wheat had brought about the resurrection of the metal. Here there is a donor of soul which is vegetable by nature, and the acceptor is a metal. The calcined lead is clearly the herbal metallic complex as a resurrection body. Pulverization of calcined metals. This is paragraph 27. If a metal is killed by heat and revived, the vehicle remains corporeal as before. If, however, it is pulverized, it becomes soul-like, and the soul corporeal is free to interact with the growth soul of the plant, and their union becomes perfect. Pulverization kills the metal physically, but it is accompanied by the herbal aspects, so that pulverization with herbal principle means it's a series of killing and resurrection. According to Philo, the impact of soul upon matter makes it soul-like. The proper effect of juice saturated with the soul is to make the corporeal nature of pulverized metal soul-like. Thus, the resultant becomes soul-like as also enlivened. Then, a resurrection body, in turn, is an immortalizing agent, turning to a materialistic explanation. In a plant, as actually observed, growth stops later on. But a ferment is capable of eternal increase. The herbal metallic complex is the resurrection body as also a ferment. Then alchemy, interpreted as resurrecting a metal, produces resurrection body, which is an immortal body. And as producing a ferment, it takes a dead metal and makes it to grow, not like a plant, but like a ferment as ever increasing. To resurrect a metal is to create out of it a living ferment. Remembering Davis maintaining a reduced substance itself a reducer, we can say that an agent made ever increasing is itself capable of conferring eternal growth. When growth is perfect, it explains the other attributes as archaeous as those which resist disease, heal, and reproduce. Paragraph 28. Calcined gold as the ideal herbal metallic preparation. We have realized that the resurrection body is the achievement of animism, which corresponds to the resurrection body of dualism, and both are immortal bodies. As such, they are also immortalizing agents. Now gold is everlasting as body. If it can be enlivened, its corporeal nature already permanent would be the easiest to deliver a drug of immortality with its soul ever growing. Gold, otherwise, was being taken internally in different ways. To make a herbal ormus preparation would be a resurrection would be to resurrect gold with the herbal soul and produce gold ferment better than any metal ferment. Now, when the gold granules are pulverized with herbal extract, yellow gold turns into a red powder as colloidal gold. The change from yellow to red would be like an anemic body turning rosy with the color of ideal health. The original gold was relatively dead. The red gold was pronounced living, in fact resurrected. And herbal extract would be red gold making juice. Since this was living gold, or to the alchemist real gold, he called the juice gold making juice. It was really resurrecting juice. There were herbs that could immortalize man, and stained further, an herbal metallic or herbal ormus preparation could therefore confer immortality via resurrection. The alchemist and animist conceived everything living. A plant grew best, next to a crystal like that of salt, finally a metal. All were living and had potentialities to grow, just like some seeds germinating later than others. The base metals prone to rust and decay were poor growers, as such could not repair injuries inflicted by the weather. However, when a powerful herb donated its growth soul, even a base metal could grow to perfection, which means to stage when it becomes fireproof. Another way of saying the same is like that it becomes gold. Base metals then were like rickety children, and their adolescence means gold. But the resulting gold was something forced to grow. And inheriting the power from a plant, it becomes ferment gold, in turn capable of transmitting power to grow to any acceptor. When a base metal becomes gold, there will be no doubt left of its having become a drug of immortality. Taking yellow gold and changing it to red gold is still not so convincing as when saying copper becomes gold. That is why the alchemist was after making gold, for its agency that brings about such a clear-cut transformation can surely do likewise with an infirm old man. Having once produced gold, it would be ferment gold, which, inoculated with mercury, would make the latter grow to perfect or everlasting gold. When this is taken as a drug by man, growth will restart, repair, and renovation, and he would require robust health. The life essence, ever increasing, would make the drug made youth and immortal youth. By now we realize how metal is made to grow with the herbal soul into an eternal and living metal, and how the resultant is a ferment first and gold next, which means ferment gold. It is gold to look at, but a ferment and an immortalizer by its properties. The role of an herb in a gold making has now to be confirmed as actually believed. Just as the Maharaja of Gondal explains herbal virtues being transferred on to metals, Mukhan Sen depicts a herb mixed with a metal turned the latter into gold. He met a bogus master of alchemy. The latter ordered a copper coin being produced. Then the master gave Mukhan Sen a fresh herb to be mixed with tobacco. The mixture was filled in a clay smoking pipe, into which was also placed the coin. When smoking reached its end and the contents of the pipe were tipped over, the copper had changed to gold. It was the herb that was making gold-making agent, when its juice would be gold-making juice. This term, translated to Chinese, means kimia, literally gold juice, but best interpreted as gold-making juice. The herb is the vehicle of this juice, and the juice a concentrate of growth soul. There are many versions of the belief that some rare plants can make gold. The implied property of growth acceleration is properly transmitted by such legends. Thus, by now we can say that Shalaka's Rasayana, or the art of rejuvenation come immortality, when extended to metals, becomes alchemy, which treats them as rickety growth growing into adolescence come immortality. In both Rasayana and Alchemy, the agent is herbal. In both, the aim is immortality. Rasayana treats an infirm old patient, while Alchemy is rickety metal first, and through is the same old patient. Thus, the chief objectives of the two were to acquire the power of transmuting base metals into gold to prepare an elixir which could impart immortality to human beings. Herb at once becomes important as the donor of growth soul, and the elixir left unspecified becomes clearer when it is identified with synthetic gold or ferment gold. Paragraph 29. Other systems of gaining longevity. We have shown that Rasayana, through really Griatrics, lies on the borderland of alchemy, which attempts to rejuvenate man and treat base metals as such rickety systems. Had there been enthusiasts attempting to synthesize gold among his contemporaries, Shakraka would have certainly mentioned it. In China, there also exist two other cults of longevity. One was concerned with deep breathing exercises, and that its counterpart in India is found as a branch of yoga system. Sharaka refers to open air modes of visualization. He lived up north, and what he refers to would be sunbathe or light therapy analogous to what is proper in Northern Europe. The other Chinese cult can be described as gymnastics and sexual intercourse. Professor Needham, in his classic on Chinese civilization, has referred to it, and the same appears to have been introduced into India by founders of the Tantric cult, who are also the pioneers of Indian mercurial alchemy. Some Indian temple sculpture depicts scenes of such sexual gymnastics. Obviously, they do not reveal increasing sexual pleasure, but have to be interpreted as exploiting ejaculated semen and to be absorbed within the body, thereby strengthening it and increasing life. A modern physician in Bangladesh looks upon intramuscular injection of one's own blood as a panacea. Correspondingly, auto-assimilation of one's own semen is another. Later mercurials were compared with semen and thereby considered as life-prolonging drugs. In fact, mercury has been called Shiva's semen, and Shiva was once an old sage who later became young, almost as Cupid. However, he particularly interests us here is that we find no trace of it in Sharaka. On page 501, he speaks of woman the best virilific, but this refers to normal sex life of a young man. On the contrary, on page 513, he definitely, I can't read this word, it's opines that, I don't know, because it's bad, I'm struggling hard with this print because it's so old. Sex, let's just keep going. On the contrary, page 513, he definitely opines that sex act is contraindicted for an old man. Thus, it seems that the tantric system of sexual gymnastics was imported later from China, like alchemy. What has to be seen further is that union of opposites here is actually between a pair of opposite sexes as generating creative force to be assimilated by the male member. The theory that union of opposites leads to creative power appears here in the most undisguised form. Later on in the paragraph 46, the opposites became Shiva, Parvati, or Hara Gari, and their union projected to that between Mercury and Mika, these being personified at the same time. Only when we realize the existence of such tantric cults, called here sexual gymnastics, that we thoroughly understand the origin and development of dualism and its exploitation in alchemy. The two run on parallel lines. Paragraph 30, the beginning of alchemy. In China, There must have existed herbalism promising immortality just as it did in India. It must be looked upon as herbal magic promising something impossible, to contrast with herbalism proper as the system of treating ailments with plants. Chinese pictures depict legendary immortals carrying a leaf representing a plant, as also a mushroom, not to talk of distillates of such plants, preserved, sealed, and gourds. Such a picture has been reproduced in an earlier article by me. Apart from plants, the Chinese also tried red minerals. This requires reverting to a past which recommends such a selection. We have discussed that the earliest concept of soul equates it not with breath or air in a movement, but with blood. Blood equals soul, then redness equals soul. Cavemen of Central Europe, as also of China, all used to smear the remains of the dead with red ochre. This custom still survives, for Burkhart Smith found it existing among the Maoris of New Zealand. They clear the bones of the dead, color red, and then bury in a distant cave. The Chinese later used minimum or red oxide of lead, and finally cinnabar, red sulfide of mercury. Purifying by fire the ores of minimum, they got lead, which became its essence, and the lead finds such a place in the earliest theory of Chinese alchemy, which recognizes lead from which all metals are made. Unable to distinguish cinnabar from minimum and refining them together, they later got also mercury, at once striking it by its heaviness and shining appearance. Sulfur must have escaped observation, for it is very volatile, and in the earlier days the technique was imperfect. Thus, from a red ore, but of a mixed nature, they got lead and mercury, which became the two elements from which even gold was made. This phase of alchemy is usually overlooked, which better familiarity with the red ores, the Chinese found nothing so close to red blood as cinnabar. This became the drug of immortality. No other people interned cinnabar with the dead, nor took it orally as a drug. Wiley informs that the human remains and on its objects associated with them as Hissentian bronzes of the 6th century BC, the nature of red pigment, according to Pelliot, is cinnabar. Whaley himself remarks, where outside China do we first meet with the ideal of eating the product of alchemical fusion, or synthetic cinnabar called vermilion, of using not merely as a healer of metals, but also as a medicine for man. To be able to make cinnabar so important, familiarity with it must have a long past. And Whaley does explain that an alchemy concerned merely with the fabrication of cinnabar no doubt goes back to very early times. When the cinnabar has been made, the gold will follow without further difficulty. This naturally implies that the Chinese fully recognize cinnabar as soul of minerals and metals, and sulfur and mercury as subsouls, which in right proportion produce gold. The sulfur-mercury theory came to stay forever. But what has not to be overlooked is the synthetic gold was to be the ideal drug of immortality. Here, there were opposite subsouls and union between them, ideal as gold. Let us here consider the juice soma. It was rich in one of the subsouls and could serve as a drug of immortality, but had to be taken regularly. All herbal drugs were largely monoelemental like soma. A herbal metallic complex, on the other hand, was constituted of two opposites or two subsouls in union. But these subsouls came from different sources. On the contrary, mercury and sulfur had a common origin as parts of cinnabar, so that they, as subsouls, could fuse better with the essence of a herb with the metal. It amounts to saying that the start with mercury and sulfur as subsouls is as good as merely reconditioning cinnabar the soul. Thus, Whaley himself looks upon alchemical gold as super cinnabar. This is why he writes that when cinnabar has been made, gold will follow without further difficulty. The difficulty is removed by the theory that subsouls of cinnabar are the two elements of gold as of any other metal, but the difficulty would persist in experimentally carrying out that theory. However, we can construct that the series blood equals soul, redness equals cinnabar equals sulfur, mercury. We can now realize how cinnabar and mercurials became special preparations of pharmaceutical chemistry in the past, and this was real alchemy. Paragraph 31. Herbalism in China as progenitor of alchemy. Herbal magic was spread all over the world and persists in disguised forms even today. Just as Indians calcined metals with plants, the Chinese must have also calcined minerals with herbs to more than purify them. In their term chemia, iya is primarily a juice, which is capable of making gold, chem. We have seen how a gold-making herb was used while rehearsing an experiment in gold synthesis. Purifying metals with herbal juices must have also been popular in China. At any rate, we have first to respect the primary sense of iya as fresh plant juice, and only then chemia can signify gold-making juice, in preference to any other concentration attributable to it. Probably, along with the use of cinnabar, herbs were also used. The two went to produce an enhanced effect. Later, a herb and a mineral gave a purified mineral of virtually an herbal mineral preparation. My knowledge here does not permit showing how an experiment similar to what Mukun Sen describes must have been accepted as typical as also in China. Their alchemy advanced much further, transcending herbalism, as did also that of the Arabs, both of which became mainly mineral or chemical. The mercurials as drugs of immortality were introduced from China into India, and alchemy came at that same time. Paragraph 33. Kashmir as connecting India with China. Buddhism spread to China from where Swat lies in Pakistan. Contacts between India and China include Kashmir as the most popular connecting link between the two continents. Stein informs that the first reference to Kashmir is a record from 541 AD during the early Tang dynasty, 90 years later being the first of Hussein Tusang. The first embassy from Kashmir by its kings Chandrapada and Muktipda was about 713 AD. In Kashmir of 8th century, there was a foreigner as a minister, Kankuna, from Tukhara land, north of Kashmir. Professor Cillian Levy equates Chankuna to San Kuan, but considers the Sanskrit name a transcription of the Chinese title. Shakuna founded the Shakuna Virara. This ministry from Tukhara land occupied important position as Latitatia's court in 8th century. Now in volume 1, page 157, we read that, producing plenty of gold in the treasury by magic power, he gave him, the king, comfort. The latter statement belongs to some legend, but production of gold as a legend can nevertheless be traced to a previous notion that gold can be synthesized. Not more need be discussed what is not historical. We are, however, certain that by the 6th century, Kashmir had received alchemy from China to have legends as above currents in the 8th century. The predominant religion at the time in Kashmir was Shivaism, which in turn harbored cults. Here I have no further information of value since the origin of tantrics itself remains uninvestigated. It nevertheless seemed probable that alchemy was practiced in India during 6th century. It was unknown in 3rd century. Paragraph 33. Indian alchemy probably begins about 500 AD. Professor Winterness critically reviews the position of India with respect to the use of mercury. He writes on page 100 that it is of great importance that Kautilya, the author of a work of the principles of state administration among different kinds of gold, mentions artificial gold, which is also mentioned in the history of Kashmir, made from other metals by a chemical process in which mercury is used. Now, the use of mercury, both in alchemy and in medicine, is well known in India, but is found only in later literature. Even P.C. Ray, in his excellent History of Indian Chemistry, believes that alchemy is indigenous to India. Cannot trace it back any further than the earliest tantric texts in the 5th and 6th century AD. In medicinal works, mercury is mentioned only once in Charaka's treatise, once in the Bauer MS of 4th century AD, and twice in the Shruta. It is entirely unknown in earlier literature. The chapter on minerals must be of later origin to the Shastra, as originally composed by Kautilya. Confirming Winternitz, Professor Stapleton writes as follows. Mercury was known and used in Europe, Near East, and China for hundreds of years before the first mention of it appears in Indian medicinal works. In China, Tensha, mercuric sulfide cinnabar, was the elixir of life from at least 200 BC. It is all the more necessary to emphasize this as very recently Sir P.C. Ray, in strange disregard to the mass of published works on the subject, including the striking evidence of the actual text of his own in the history of Hindu chemistry, has again stated that the knowledge of pharmacy which the Arabs brought to Europe, especially the use of mercury, should be credited to India. However, from a short article in Isis, we learn that Philosoph of the existence of alchemy long before the time supposed by P.C. Ray. If calcine metals were alchemical preparations, then Indian alchemy is old. But if alchemy is to be restricted as preparing mercurials, then it is a later introduction from China. Legends cannot be valued unless we know the existence or absence first of a cult that seriously took to synthesizing gold, using mercury, not magic as mentioned in the history of Kashmir. Moreover, synthetic gold was during the immortality, whereas magical gold, a substitute of metallic gold. However, if the grant that India purported alchemy from China, its development in India is relatively fast, can be easily appreciated. Paragraph 34. Alchemy in India about 1000 AD. Alchemy is the art of rejuvenation using mercurials. Rasayana is the generic term for the art of rejuvenation, which is first stated with the use of herbal mixtures and ended by preferring mercurials. We have seen that Charaka mentions drugs of rejuvenation, recognizing the art as physician. About 800 AD lived another master of Indian medicine comparable with Galen in Greek medicine. He is known as Vagbati, whereas Charaka had 2 divisions. Vagbati has 8. Medicine comprising of 8 departments was called Ashtanga, constituent of 8 members. Monier Williams translates the term Ashtanga as 8 parts and enumerates all of them. The 2 that interest us are Rasayana Tantra and the doctrine of elixirs, and Vijikarana Tantra, or the doctrines of aphrodisiacs. The latter may be useful to some use, but the doctrine of rejuvenation is clearly Griatrics. Conceived by the earliest ascetics of India, confirmed by Charaka, and finally recognized by Burgadi, the Galilean of India. We should not be surprised then if Alberina speaks of its as well-recognized system in India and overlooks alchemy and mercurials as medicine or even gold making. We are not interested here in alchemy as such as in its doctrines, but in its history. As we merely notice, the Alberina speaks Nagarjuna by name, who lived about 800 AD and occupies a position in Indian mercurial alchemy comparable to that of Jabir ibn Hayyan and that of Islamic, where when Sir Pt.3 refers to the position of Indian alchemy about 1000 AD, his main authority has been Al-Biruni. He was an acute observer, differentiating the views of the intelligentsia from the beliefs of the crowd. He has therefore realized this special feature of Indian medicine, the like of which he missed in Muslim countries. Al-Biruni lived in India from 1017 to 1030 AD and found at the time that the Hindus have a science similar to alchemy, which is peculiar to them. They call it Rasayana, a word composed of rasa, i.e. gold. It means the art of which restricted to certain operations, drugs and compound medicines, most of which are taken from plants. Its principles restore health of those who were ill beyond hope and gave back youth to fading old age, so that people became again that they were in the age near puberty, and restored the capacity of juvenile agility with robust health and even that of cohabitation. Charaka also spoke of rejuvenated sages becoming attractive to women. Moreover, Al-Biruni dispenses in these few words that calcination and sublimation inclined towards mineralogical method of alchemy. Yet this is not alchemy proper, for Charaka does mention calcined metals or herbal metallic preparations. Mere mention of Nagarjuna by name and curiously referring to mineralogical alchemy merely shows the Rasayanas as existing then, were same as Charaka's age, and what were not yet popular about 1000 AD were mercurial drugs and alchemy as the art of gold making. Paragraph. Well, okay. So before I go on, I just want to note for myself, case and purpose, for myself is that they're saying they had so the mantras and their system of rejuvenation, of repeating the mantras and receiving the essence of life, the prana of life, eating that which is like breathing the air and different air breathing exercises. I think this is what they're mentioning here. Excuse me. This is what they're mentioning here as far as the earlier accounts of alchemy for the Rasayanas was more like that of a mineralogical alchemy. So it wasn't like with the practical alchemy that everyone else seemed to be practicing. So that's pretty, that's something to note. Moving on to 35, Momia, a panacea of later origin in India. Al-Biruni also refers to legends specifying them as such. He records that a book on Rasayana, according to the legend, contains the prescription of a medicine made with oil and human blood, both being required. In this connection, he mentions the preparation of raktamali. Now such a medicament does exist, and its latest designation is Momia. Raktamali or Raktamala is mentioned as Al-Biruni as existing as a legendary work. Sachal explains its etymology as Rakta, red, and Amala, Philanthus umbilica, or red amla, but Al-Biruni clearly mentions its constituents as oil and human blood, so that Rakta blood and with amla, Raktamla, may be blood and amla. I am unable to further interpret Raktamla etymology, but I am certain that it is a preparation with human blood, so that Raktamala equals momia. Momia, in turn, is best conceived as the substitute of mummy as drug. Possibly the name momia itself is traceable to mummy. Fote illustrates an actual Egyptian mummy and further states that it was a famous cure-all of the Dark Ages. The medieval medicine man imported in its original mummy case from the banks of the Nile as a sure panacea for all the ills that flesh is here to dried mummy was favorable remedy. There was such substitution, and bodies were dried in imitation of the genuine article. There was a formula consisting of a distillate of human bones. Thus, human remains were also exploited as medicaments. And momia obviously belonged to that category. This is really interesting. So they're basically saying that they were using mummified bodies. The cells, I believe they're talking about the cells somehow revitalizing themselves and using it as medicines, and also that of the bones, which I'll just allude to this later. We'll just finish the book and then we'll move forward. Let's just keep going. Momia is described by Mokira, who was professional physician of the Indian system of medicine of Vrida. In Sanskrit text quoted, it is termed human oil. The author's commentary on page 293 explains it as follows. It is human fat that can be obtained in the most cruel manner. A human hermaphrodite is to be fed with nutritious food to make the creature sufficiently fat. It is then to be filleted alive and hanged with the feet upwards and head downwards, kept suspended over an iron cauldron heated by a strong fire. When sufficiently heated, fat begins to come out of the body, an unfortunate creature, and falls into the cauldron. This fat is very efficacious in instantly healing wounds and cuts in animal bodies. This is the oil which, according to tradition, the physician Asviena Kumara applied to joining the goat's head to the body of a king Daksha, who had been beheaded, and his son-in-law, and thereby effected a resurrection of the death. Tucker explains brain oil. Momia, capture a child, hang it up by the heels over a cauldron of boiling oil, puncture the skull, the brain oil will then exude. This brain oil fetches high prices as styptic for fresh wounds. It is now very difficult to procure. G. Wolfe confirms writing, Mamia catch a lad, the blacker the better, fatten him on fruits without salt and bread. When he is fat, hang him by the heels to a tripod over a cauldron of boiling ghee, butter. Tap the center of the skull, letting the blood fall into the cauldron. Internally, it is an aphrodisiac and cures impotence. All Hakims, Muslim physicians, and Baids, Hindu Avedic physicians, make thus. Oh my goodness. What? Wow. Rewind this and listen to that again. Here we have the right indications. Momia is blood and oil preparations. It heals wounds when externally used, but cures impotency, thereby amounting to rejuvenation when used internally. Perhaps the most candid confirmation of its existence is observation by Millet, in reply to the remark of the Tucker stating that there are still European officials in Simla who make brain oil from natives. Their chaparasas, messengers, kidnap children and others for this purpose. Wow, could that be the underlying cause of all of this, human trafficking and people going missing, and, this underground world of just, stealing babies and women and children. It's absolutely insane, but, oh my gosh. Wow. This is real. Wow. That would explain so much if that was true. Let's keep going. Okay, what I do wish to emphasize is the incorporation of human blood and momia, correctly recorded by El Biruni, though the source was legendary, but it is confirmed by Wolfe. That human blood could also be incorporated in a calcine metal is clearly mentioned by Mukudri. He writes that mica, Indian substitute of lead, when lead, mercury were the two elements of all metals, is to be powdered very fine and subjected to calcination with human oil, momia. Here, calcined mica would be human blood and mica, like herbal juice and metal. Blood is soul on calcining. Blood as soul reincarnates itself in mica. For such a preparation, first momia is made and then calcined into mica, or calcined with mica. To understand momia, we must appreciate mummy as drug. Mummy is a body immune to decomposition, unlike any corpse. It is everlasting like gold in the form of dry body. Then both mummy and gold are corporal vehicles of soul, each in itself everlasting. Blood is soul, and the mummy is entire blood has been preserved, so that any piece of mummy, though dried fresh, actually signifies dried blood or incorporated soul. Had blood been expelled and only the flesh dried, there would have been no soul. When momia is prepared, blood, the soul, as well as observed in oil, it is otherwise naturally preserved in the mummy. Thus, mummy is superior to the flesh without blood, as also to the blood which has not been conserved properly. In preparing momia, it is preciously human blood and not human flesh that becomes its main ingredient, and attributes assigned to momia are precisely those of blood or of soul. As in the herbal metallic preparation, metal is the vehicle, and momia, oil is the vehicle, and blood as good as soul. Not fat, but blood is the content. Then blood at its best, coming from the brain, the seat of intelligence. Wolfe has correctly interpreted momia as the blood preparation. The one virtue attributed to the momia is the power to heal wounds, a phenomenon which in turn best heals the power of growth, indolent or inert tissue, and taken internally, momia would diffuse into a system and make every organ and gland grow to its full capacity, and thus drive away disease, be it anywhere. This qualifies it as panacea. Okay, we're going to stop right here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Woo, baby, did you read that? Just rewind and listen again, honey. Oh, my. History. I'm sure you have a lot to think about. I'm sure you have a lot going on. Any thoughts that come up, get into the discussion, leave a comment, and let's hear it. Until next time, you guys, have a wonderful evening, a wonderful day, wherever you're at in this moment. Be well.